The show's going to be a little different this season.
We are referring to this as Game of the Game. Well, the game is that there's a hat. In that hat, there are prompts. We do not know what these prompts say.
You and we both don't know what we're going to be talking about next episode. Cookie Pocket, the game of the game.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.
The game of the game.
I'm done.
I don't think this was as much of a chore as you were predicting, Christian. I think at worst this was just sort of forgettable. I know it's your whole thing that you dislike Italian horror, but I don't think this was anywhere near as bad as you were making it out to be.
Actually, I was going to say something, Zachary. I was going to say I did not see a single boob in this whole thing because I watched the YouTube version, and I was not aware that there even were boobs, but I was confused that there wasn't any. So I looked into it, and I'm actually really, really glad that I didn't, because it adds to those scenes that shouldn't even exist in the first place, by the way.
Yes.
But I actually, like, I feel like I finally got, like, what really, like, I got the messaging way better by them not just being completely naked. And I feel like this is a discussion we've had before about the necessity of sex scenes. And I feel like even though I still, like, this is taking it from, like, a 0 to a 1 out of 10 in terms of, like, the necessity of that scene, but I do think it adds to the scene not seeing anything. I don't know how I ended up. I got a free trial of some horror thing on YouTube, and that's how I was able to see it.
So the scenes were fully cut out for you. They weren't like censored and blurred.
No, the scenes were in it. The scenes were in it. They just cut out the parts where they were nude, and I actually looked it up just to double check, and I didn't miss any scenes. It's just that the scenes were heavily cut.
That's interesting.
So it actually, it worked. I don't know how
many
happened,
versions of this?
Because with a name like Lady Frankenstein, there's actually not as much nudity in this film as you would expect. There's a scene where there's one throwaway scene. It's the first time that we see the monster like on a rampage, and it's a very hard tonal shift for the whole movie because the monster gets out, and they go, "The monster is out." Smash cut to the monster plotzing along a rope bridge, and then he looks down and sees a fully naked woman. So there's that scene. There's a scene where Lynch is interrogated by the detective, and a woman in bed that he was having sex with pops up to go, "Here I am," for like a shot, and then goes back under the covers. And then at the end, they're having sex in the fiery castle when the abrupt title card kills them.
Yes. No, so all of those scenes are in this. It literally is just cutting to where there isn't any nudity. If you go back, there are parts of it. So like I think the most cut one was probably when what's his name is with the prostitute or whoever.
Oh, Lynch,
room. He cuts in and it's just her face, basically.
Okay.
And then he kills her, and it's a little abrupt, but like, I mean, you get the point of the scene pretty quick, so I wasn't really complaining.
Oh yeah.
But I was confused. I was like, there's no way there's got to be like some real nudity in here or something. So I looked into it.
Yeah. I mean, that is, I would say, the least. I don't think any of the nudity in this is necessarily merited beyond like the final scene. I think it's fine that, you know, that's a fine image of, you know, them being nude as the castle is burning down. I don't really think any of the nudity in this is merited, but that scene has the least merited nudity because she kind of just pops up out of bed to go, "Boobs are here," and then disappears until the end of the scene. In the midst of what I think is, I mean, I don't really like the detective, but I think it's a modestly compelling scene of dialogue. I like the guy who plays Lynch. I think he's a decent actor who does some interesting things with his face and his eyes and whatnot.
I think,
but we kind of came at this from a backward direction.
Yeah.
Christian,
no, we came in from the frontward angle, Zach.
Do you want to tell us what we're talking about today and why?
Not particularly, no.
Who's
but
you?
I suppose it falls to me because of this sick,
It falls to
twisted game we've devised for this season that was supposed to work in
Saw
such
11.
a different way, because if I remember correctly, at this point we've talked about Italian horror every season since I think season 2. Is that correct?
Did we talk
I think
about it
that's
the first
accurate.
season?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think we talked about it in the first season.
So my understanding was that the game of the game was a means to an end of branching out more and talking about things that we hadn't talked about before. But here I am sitting here after a universal 1-star rating from all of us in our first episode. And now we're at another Italian horror movie, which at best can be described as forgettable. So I'm not having fun here. I pulled a prompt that Zach wrote
Yes.
that told me I had to pick an Italian horror or a giallo. And because I very much admire Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and because we had talked about Cushing's film, and we've seen other Frankenstein-adjacent films, though not necessarily for the podcast. The Bride of Frankenstein was one of our more memorable movie nights outside of Cookie Pocket. But I chose this because I had to choose something, and I ran out of time. And this is what we're left with. Lady Frankenstein, 1971. And I think we still need to deconstruct what versions each of us watched and how many there are. Because when I went on Tubi to watch this, there were 2 versions. One was, I think, an hour and 40 minutes. And one was, I think, an hour, 24 minutes. And I said, you know what? I'm saving myself 15 minutes of life. And I watched the shorter version. And I can't remember a scene with a prostitute. I maybe I'm forgetting.
It was the girl that Lynch was having fun with.
Yeah,
Rolling in the
I'm not sure.
Lynch the gravedigger.
Okay. Yeah, I know Lynch. But
When the monster kills him later, he breaks into his apartment and that same girl is there. So there's an earlier scene with her where the detective comes in and goes, like he does in every scene, I know you're up to something. That's his whole purpose in the movie, is to go, I know you're up to something, even though we already know what everybody is up to. So it's not a very useful character. But she's there in that first scene.
yeah, okay. Well, whatever. Jeez. The forgettability of this is, I mean, we already started getting into this, but I think like the first 40 minutes are like a somewhat straight Frankenstein telling plus adding in Frankenstein's daughter. And that was a strange 40 minutes because Joseph Cotton is the main Baron Frankenstein, who we know, who was on the show for most recently The Magnificent Ambersons and is best known for his many leading roles in Orson Welles films. It's such a, I mean, he seems to be approaching it from a professional way, but it's so dull, and some of the lines are just laughably bad. The one that stuck out to me is I may be a woman, but I'm also a doctor. Which it's like it's very funny to hear them like try to sound feminist and fail. And then like Zach already mentioned, that hard cut to the Italian horror violence. So you know what? I don't really care. I don't care, Zach. I don't care. None of this particularly impressed me. I guess the monster looked okay, but you know I don't care for the exploitation stuff and like the nudity things Mitchell brought up. And I guess there's some atmosphere. The set dressing was like fine. Maybe this could be a 2, but I'm giving it a 1.5 because I can. So there.
If I may defend my prompt for a moment. Because yes, you're correct. The purpose of the game was to encourage us branching out and doing different things. And I thought, which I think was kind of the case here, I would never have picked this movie for the show because I don't think it's very good either. But the point being, I know that you two aren't too big on the Italian horror that I have brought to the table in the past. But if we're speaking in terms of all Italian horror, I have only brought 4 movies by 3 directors to the table. That is a drop in the veritable ocean of what this genre represents. So I felt it would be interesting to present you guys with the opportunity, whichever one of you pulled this prompt, to pick something that you thought sounded interesting from a genre that you have in the past really disliked. And I thought there could be something interesting that sprang from that in sort of picking your poison, and that we might find something unexpected amidst that choice. Now, unfortunately, I don't think that happened, but I don't think that means that there wasn't some kind of method to my madness.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome, Zach. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty cool. I think it's great. I think it's great.
The movie
that Christian chose us that. Settle down. I think it's great that Christian chose this film. I think it's great. I think because of all of our collective experiences with Frankenstein, and I would say, I always lean more towards Zach's appreciation than I do Christian's behest. And I think I was very, very fond of the atmosphere, and I wasn't completely dismissive of the premise. I was not completely dismissive of it. Like, if you read it to me, I'd be like, this is not impossible to execute. I do think there is some viability in, especially from like a feminist angle. The problem is that it's not a feminist angle. It kind of turns into the opposite.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And I will say, I would be willing to bet. I'm not going to say definitively, but I'd be willing to bet that if it was a woman that wrote it, even at this time, I still think it would probably be a more feminist, better executed message.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it being in the guise of the Italian horror trappings that are pretty evident here, that may not be evident in other Italian horror, and not to such a degree in other films that we've seen. Yeah, I think it fumbled the bag. I think it fumbled the bag, unlike every single male in this movie, apparently, that interacts with this woman, Tanya the Rizzler, who turns every single male except the detective guy into an absolute simp in 2 seconds, completely removes you from your hardened scientific morals, because, like, well, you know you do love me, right? And just immediately gaslights everybody. And which, by the way, politically incorrect. I won't completely fault the film for the whole Thomas angle, right?
Sure, yeah.
With the disability thing, because that is a time difference thing. But it's very aggressive here, guys. It's very aggressive, okay? It's a major plot point, all right? She completely abused this man, okay? That and they kill him and use him as a vessel. Okay, that's a pretty bad plot point. All right,
I do think you're meant to think like, oh, that's monstrous. Like, what are they doing? Like,
right. I get it, but I think it just becomes absolutely distasteful. And like, I do see what you're saying, Zach. Like, I'm on the goth way of looking at this. Typo negative fan here. I'm seeing what's the Rob Zombie. I'm seeing what's going on, right? We're trying to be crazy for the sake of being crazy. We're trying to be out there and you know, be different, but it's way too much. It is way too excessive. It has virtually no weight to it whatsoever. It really just comes across as a pointless adaptation in the end, which is unfortunate, because I mean, there is some respect paid to the source material. There is some. It's not like it's completely going haywire, ruining everything. It's taking something that already exists and trying to be different, and still adhering to this pretty atmospheric production. And that's something to be appreciated. Outside of that, everything else is a disaster.
I do think in that first third, this, whether accidentally or not, does do some kind of interesting things in like moments with the Frankenstein mythos that I feel like I haven't seen in other adaptations of the source material. I like that we, in the moment of the operation, get kind of a direct realization of Frankenstein's hubris and kind of his fatal flaw as a character. Because in other films, Frankenstein's creature ends up with an abnormal brain because his assistant is rushed or sloppy, or maybe it doesn't end up with an abnormal brain at all, and it just goes mad because whoopsie, what did we think we were doing in the first place? But here there is a moment where his assistant goes, hey, there's this issue with the brain. We should really get a different brain because this probably isn't going to go well if we use this one. And Frankenstein, in the moment, we see kind of how impatient he is, or how he's kind of rushing this process at the end. And he says, it's too late in the day. We'll use it and see what happens. And that kind of leads to his downfall. And it's a small thing, but I like that that's in the movie. I like that that little detail is there. I like that, so many Frankenstein movies, the creature gets up off the table and it looks like Jason Voorhees. And you go, why on earth did he make it look like that? And it's not really explained. In the book, that is addressed. But a lot of movies do a very poor job of incorporating that. I like that in this movie, the creature is fire damaged by the process of it coming to life. And there's this kind of, oh, shoot, it's on fire. We have to do something. Again, a small thing, but I like that that detail is in the movies. I don't think this is like a totally slapdash job, at least during the stuff set in the castle. It does kind of feel like whoever shot the stuff with the monster outside the castle was like a different director, or they had like a day to shoot everything. Because as soon as we go outside, everything gets a lot sloppier. But I do like the atmosphere of the stuff inside the castle. And it does feel like there's some kind of intention behind that stuff, at least.
I think Mitchell kind of approached where I'm coming from when he was talking about how the premise has promise, but it being caught in the Italian horror trappings doesn't quite work. Like, Zach, when you mentioned that the whole transplanting the smart guy's brain into the physically attractive guy's body so that you could get 2 in 1 is a pretty sinister thing. But I think the way it's played, especially Tanya Frankenstein being in essence a sexual object to most of the viewers. I mean, she has this like scientific knowledge and is following her father's path, but I think in the exploitation angle of Italian horror, she is like the desirable figure that men enjoy looking at, both audience members and characters. So then it is harder, I think, to appreciate her evil choices when it's being watched as like an exploitation movie. I think the dramatic effect of villainous choices hits a little less. And I will say, in fairness, in my review, I kind of have this refrain of criticizing any deviation from Mary Shelley's story because she wrote it perfectly the first time. But on the other hand, we've seen so many Frankenstein adaptations, varying from pretty much completely loyal to all over the place. And I think at least the idea of Baron Frankenstein's daughter taking on his work after he died has promise. I think another way it doesn't quite work is she kind of, to me, it seems like she just does a version of what her father would have done if he stayed alive. And I think it would have been a lot more interesting if there was a more noticeable difference between the two of them as characters, morally and scientifically.
It's the classic kaiju trapping where it's like, the only way, we've tried everything. We've thrown multinational militaries at this thing. We have to make another one. It's the only way. It's the only way. But the thing is, in this, it's not even, you don't even interpret it as a logical decision.
Yeah.
Because by the time she's just starting to rizz up everybody, it's like, okay, she's just, they designed this character. They wrote this character to be horny and have sex with this new creature. That was the point. That was the message. Okay, there's no other logical explanation. Everything else is a gaslight.
I do think it's very funny how they do come to the conclusion that they need to build another creature, though, because Mitchell, the comparison you made to like Godzilla films, where they're like, well, we've done everything. We need to make a giant robot of our own. It's the only logical conclusion. They don't even like try anything else. Like Dad's body is barely cold, and she's like, I guess we got to build another one. I'll do it in a couple of weeks. It took my dad 3 years. I can do it in 3 weeks.
And he's got to be a 2-in-1 deal, like Christian said.
That's amazing.
Yeah, you guys have both mentioned the way that it's written and how it kind of seems to exploit the titular character, Lady Frankenstein. I was doing a bit of reading on the development of this movie, and I'm not sure how much truth there is to this, although I don't know why anybody would lie about this. But apparently, when this script was originally written, the script was actually, it was written and directed by two American guys. They made it in Italy, but these guys, they immigrated to Italy and made it there because it was cheaper. But the guy who wrote it originally wrote it as Lady Dracula, and he wrote it specifically for this lead actress because he apparently was lusting after her despite never having met her, and really wanted to write a role for her so he could meet her and court her and perhaps marry her. And so real creepy stuff.
I respect the hustle.
And he gave the script. Subscriber. He gave the script to Mel Wells, who is the director, who was also an actor. If any of you guys or any of our listeners have seen the original Little Shop of Horrors from the 60s, he's the original Mr. Mushnick.
That's crazy.
But he adapted the script to be quote unquote more feminist. So I have to wonder what was in the original script. Was it an even more transparent excuse for this writer to see this actress he had a crush on naked?
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, again, the title Lady Dracula, if in that form it follows a similar plot of OG Dracula biting the dust and Lady Dracula replacing him, I think that could have been a lot more interesting. I think that might be a more successful subversion of power, and I think even the sort of exploitative sexual elements might work better just because I think that's much more on the page for Dracula than it is for Frankenstein.
Sure, yeah.
I think looking at it from a second wave feminism standpoint, where there's a lot of like liberating from traditional values, I feel as though maybe they were trying to interpret it like her being decisive and choosing to go after these men at her own volition and deciding to create a creature and like taking the lead on that while also being sexually liberating. I guess that was the angle they're trying to go for. I mean, I'm trying to think of what the narrative was, because like that is a reason, like on paper that's a reasonable expectation, but in execution it looks like a man wrote it.
Yeah.
I guess is the best way to describe it.
This is 71. I don't know what the brackets are for the sexual revolution. Maybe there aren't specific brackets. Maybe it's just the 60s and early 70s. But
yeah.
Steve Martin, in a routine, once commented that the sexual revolution was a time when men tricked women into thinking it was really sexually liberating to have sex with as many guys as possible, and then they figured it out and stopped doing it. And this movie does kind of feel like it slots right into that. It's like, she's true. Empowered. Look at all the guys she has sex with, babe. Look at them.
Oof.
I definitely would want to see an interview or something, or just some, I mean, even then it's still, there's pressure and being in the role and everything. Obviously, you don't want to speak poorly of the role that you were in, or pressure from producers or whatever. But it would be interesting to like see an honest perspective, or maybe like later in life she talked about it. But it's just a different time period, so it's really hard to like assess from a modern perspective how bad it really is. But we can say definitively it's aged horribly. On all accounts.
I think it's aged. I don't think it's repulsive to watch now in the way some stuff from the era has watched. I think it's aged to a status of just being kind of like campy and dated.
Yeah.
But it certainly doesn't, it doesn't feel feminist.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how much of her early screen time is not that. And there being two directors on this raises its own set of questions. And I glanced at this actress's bio very briefly on Letterboxd, and it seemed like she had done a lot of these kind of exploitation angle erotic horror movies. So I don't know if she would necessarily have a negative opinion on this that doesn't apply to some of the other things she's done. But yeah, I don't know. I will say, to its partial credit, I often complain about dubbing and just acting in general in Italian horror. And again, I think Joseph Cotton is fine. I think Neri as Tanya is like pretty much fine. I think some of her deliveries were kind of stiff, but I think it's kind of like how we talk about a puppet character. If a puppeteer is playing a character, what really brings them to life is how the actors around them treat that character. I think something similar can be said for Tanya as a seductress. So I think she can kind of do whatever she wants as long as the men are falling over their feet for her as they were.
She's still alive. We missed the opportunity to call her agent to have her on. She's 86. What do you think?
Alas.
Yeah, I do think the dubbing in this, while I wouldn't say it's great, I do think some of it is pretty good. I think the guy who plays Lynch, I don't know if he dubbed his own lines, but whoever's doing the voice matches the physical performance quite well. And I think he's quite interesting to look at as a character. I wish he was in the movie a little bit more, because he's this fairly interesting character. Anytime that there's like a gravedigger or like a skeevy butler or something in horror movies like these, they always get these really talented like character actors in who clearly have like a sense of humor about what they're doing and just imbue their performance with like so much life that's just appropriate to the movie that they're in. I think in some ways a character like Lynch and the way he's played comes off as more fitting for this story than what Joseph Cotton is doing. Because Joseph Cotton is, a professional actor, and he's, delivering it to the back row and giving it his all. But I think that Joseph Cotton does need some like material to work with, and there's not really much here for him to draw off of. While watching it, I was thinking the role seems tailor-made for a different Cookie Pocket alum, Vincent Price. I think because he's an actor who has kind of that slight edge of like scenery chewing, where he can bring a lot of distinct personality to a character like this, which is really nothing on the page, where Joseph Cotton just seems to kind of be a little lost without a handrail.
Yeah, it's funny. Both of those names, top of the billing for the abominable Dr. Phibes, way back in season 1.
Oh yes,
yeah.
Whoa.
I totally forgot Joseph Cotton was in that.
Yeah, it's easy to. It like does not correspond with his Wells stuff at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tolerated the score on this. We talk about score sometimes, and usually it's like, this was good, this was bad, or this was fine. And to me, this was fine. I thought it was functional. A lot of strings, a lot of dramatic staccato. I would call it a standard horror score, or a standard 70s Italian horror score, as it were.
There wasn't any particularly grotesque close-ups like we've seen before. I think this was like the least disgusting Italian horror that we've seen, which is, it's not really saying something, honestly. It's like, this was pretty tame.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I thought the fight scenes were pretty well choreographed, considering, it wasn't anything to write home about, but like, I don't know. I thought it was pretty well paced with the creature scenes.
I think for, something that you might see at like the drive-in expecting very little, the end fight scene between the two creatures is okay. When he chopped the one's arm off, I was kind of decently like surprised. I went, whoa, in my living room. I would say that like the gory close-ups and kills and stuff are much more of a giallo thing. That's much more of like an Argento, Lucio Fulci thing. Whereas a lot of gothic horror like this doesn't do that as much. Mm-hmm. I think this is a much worse movie, but I think the DNA of what this is trying to emulate has a lot more in common with something like Black Sabbath, which I think we all agreed was much tamer when we talked about that 2 seasons ago, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right. Wow. Yeah. I'm not okay. So since you mentioned that these guys were Americans and that they came to Italy to shoot it, I've been shaking in my boots, hoping that I'm not facing some extreme martial law punishment from you two. So this better still freaking count as Italian horror, or else.
Well,
it definitely does count.
Yeah, I was going to say, if Mitchell wanted to contest, then we could talk about it. But I think since it was made by an Italian production company, regardless of the fact that they hired Americans who were living in Italy at the time, I think it still classifies as an Italian movie. I mean, Mel Wells and whatever his name, I think, are basically the only Americans involved in terms of crew, and everybody else down the line they might be credited differently depending upon what version of the movie you're seeing, because they used to do this a lot when they brought movies to America. They changed the names of the Italian crew in the opening credits to make it seem like an American movie. So like when The Beyond came to America, it was originally called The Seven Doors of Hell by director Louis Fuller instead of Lucio Fulci. But everybody in this is Italian, other than the guy who directed it, pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have much else to say about this, Zach. I'm sorry. We went.
It's your movie.
You say that, but
I'm sorry,
we moved
Zach.
to a hostless format, so I disavow any responsibility.
I was super surprised at the quality of the coloration, and really just every one of the setup shots and the wides were really engaging. I had a good sense of the setting, and I felt like it really didn't feel that cheap, to be honest.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was pretty immersive. It's like you're not asking for much, especially with the Frankenstein adaptations. I mean, this is probably the most common props imaginable and the easiest locations to access. But at the same time, it's they could have easily messed that up. I mean, that I don't know. I feel like it could have been a lot worse, but the costumes were really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's so weird to me that, I mean, they're in Italy, so immediately, just based on the countryside and the history of the area, they have some immediate production value that you wouldn't have if you were shooting this in LA. And they shot a lot of the exteriors at an actual castle, and I don't think there is a single wide of the castle in the whole movie.
Yeah.
With what they shot at the castle, they might as well have shot it on sets anyway, or just in the woods next to a stone cliff or something. It does feel like a bit of a wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's clearly a B feature, but I Christian, you said in your Letterboxd review, unless I misread it, that you enjoyed Manos more than this, which
I did.
I don't believe you.
I did. It is written.
I'll be honest. I agree.
Let's go.
I agree. Even though I think this is objectively better, and in a lot of ways, I think Manos was. I think it was just so enjoyable because you're on a roller coaster the whole time. You weren't just kind of waiting for the deviation from an original story that's a million bazillion times better. It's more just man, what's gonna happen next? It's this is a funhouse, freaking circus going on.
I guess if you find Manos bad in a funny way, I could see that. I don't find Manos bad in a funny way. I mostly find it just interminably boring. This is dull, but things continue to happen, and every once in a while, we'll cut to a shot of the creature going on the hill for a second, or throwing somebody through a window, or stumbling around a barn while a man tells his son to run away and then runs directly at him with no weapon whatsoever. Things continue to happen, versus Manos, where we stare at the dark or a painting for about 50 minutes.
Yeah.
But, to each their own, I suppose.
Manos was brutal, and it's close, but I still think there were moments I laughed really hard 2 or 3 times in the first 20 minutes of Manos because of things that were just so bad I had to laugh. And I didn't experience such unbridled joy at any point during Lady Frankenstein. It's at some point, Zach, you said that really a 2-star can be less of a compliment than a 1-star, because a 2-star means true, you were competently boring, whereas the 1-star stands out more. So
that's true. And we talked about the amateurishness, amateurish. I don't know. of somebody just like saying I can do this and then they blow it. I just think that's awesome.
Yeah.
And then just like if you're gonna copy the source material, obviously like we all three of us honestly have a thing about source material and defending its integrity.
This is true.
Yeah, I guess that's all fair. I think like Manos, you know, if you want to put this on the background of like a Halloween party or something, there's some neat imagery. You know, Frankenstein movies always have some great lab gizmos and some nice lightning storms and shadowy castles, which are always fun to have in the background in Halloween. But yeah, I think I even said on my Letterboxd review, you don't need to sit down and watch this unless you're like a really dedicated Frankenstein fan. Even then, it might make you just more angry than entertained.
Yeah.
Or you're horny.
Oh,
Let's
no.
be honest here.
I don't really even think that this functions as
And you're goth, sorry. You have to be
like
goth.
arousing.
No,
Which
it's not.
I know
if
my
you're
parents
goth,
listen to
it's
this
arousing.
podcast, so sorry, Mom. But like this is an hour and 40 minutes, a majority of which is just people talking in small rooms. Like I don't think unless the shot
Zach's
of
arousal meter.
unless images of Francisca Neri really get you know hot and bothered in her lace dresses. Like I don't think
at
you're gonna
the-
get anything out of this.
Zach, look at Reddit. Look at the letterbox
no.
reviews. There are women. There are women that are enjoying this in that way.
Oh yeah,
okay?
you know Oscar-winning director Sean Baker. He wrote a
He
review.
has so many fun cult reviews on
He's
Letterboxd.
like, sometimes it doesn't rise above Ed Wood level silliness, but then there is Rosalba Neri. Her presence alone elevates a film like Lady Frankenstein to a classic level. Sean Baker's
I
words.
think okay. So here's something to consider though. Sean Baker loves like drive-in cult crap.
This is true.
Sean Baker is one of these guys who reviews like you know, in the 70s, in like 60s and 70s, the golden age of porn. He like reviews those on Letterboxd. So this is not a man who is comparing Lady Frankenstein to Magnolia or anything like that.
There are people out there, Zach.
I'm sure there's people who
They wanna
enjoy
print
it.
out the
I just
poster.
I'm reluctant to tell somebody, oh yeah, Lady Frankenstein, or oh, you know. I think you'll be bored more than anything else.
Yeah.
Well, on that note,
Well, now that my mother has stopped listening, do we want to go to week in review?
that sounds good to me. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I'm deciding between two recent theatrical releases. You know what? I'm gonna in the spirit of the game, I want you two to choose what I talk about. Am I going to talk about Mission Impossible: The Final Reckoning or Friendship?
Friendship.
Well, Zach talked first.
Oh,
Sorry.
democracy has failed.
Yeah, it's funny how that happens. But Zach buzzed in first, so sorry,
All right,
Mitchell.
fair enough.
I've got to give him a
Okay.
win sometimes.
I won't forgive you,
Yeah.
but okay.
I understand. Friendship. Yeah. If you watch, I Think You Should Leave, which is Tim Robinson's Netflix comedy series, you'll know what you're in for. Tim Robinson plays this suburbanite dad, and he works at this company that designs technology to be addicting, and which is its own way of funny angle. But he has this kind of broken home life, and he meets this new neighbor, and he finally thinks he's going to make a friend, and then it all goes terribly wrong in Tim Robinson, I Think You Should Leave ways. I saw the teaser trailer for this, and I got kind of excited for it because at least there's a lot more of Tim Robinson like having moments of being subdued. And I was kind of hoping that this would be different than I Think You Should Leave, or at least give Robinson an opportunity to show some more dramatic acting choices, albeit in a comedy, because I think we find a lot of times that comedians and comedic actors often have really good dramatic chops once they're given the chance to show them. This is not what I wanted it to be, but it was still really effective. Tim Robinson's as lampooning as ever. But I found this really agonizing at some point, maybe around halfway, because I mean, this is kind of like semi-spoiler territory, but he just kind of, it's like everything just keeps getting worse, and he keeps being more of an anxious mess and trying to fix things, and he's so socially inept that things go so drastically wrong in the way they only can for Tim Robinson. And it doesn't help that I had like made a new friend maybe a week or so before seeing this, and I was thinking about seeing it with said friend, and I was so glad I didn't, because if I did, I would have been like out of my freaking mind. It would have been so surreal and upsetting to see somebody fail to keep a new friend on screen with a new friend. But there are some really quality jokes in here. I did laugh out loud a few times, even in the second half, despite my eventual terror. This was a strong 3.5 for me. I could definitely see this becoming like a cult favorite. I think it's unfortunate that it's coming out the same weekend as Mission Impossible and the frickin' live action Lilo and Stitch, because those two are taking all the money and the marketing from it. But I think it's worth seeing if you're an A24 dark comedy guy. I think both you guys would find things to like about it, and it'd probably be in the 3+ star range for both of you.
As somebody who likes I Think You Should Leave, and we talked about this before this episode, even before you even saw the movie, I'm surprised you expected the movie to be anything other than what it sounds like it was. Because watching the trailer, there are moments where he's a bit quieter, but I got the vibe of like, that's exactly how he acts in every sketch before something really blows up. Yeah. That's not dramatic acting. That's I'm waiting to pounce acting. So I'm not surprised to hear that it was probably exactly what I thought it was going to be, but I do want to see it. I agree with you that it does seem like it got kind of sucked under the wheels of much bigger movies this past weekend.
Yeah, it was wishful thinking in retrospect, but I don't think the movie's necessarily worse off for it. I think if I had seen it in a different frame of mind and in different personal circumstances, I might have liked it even more. But it was one of the most bizarre, unnerving viewing experiences for me ever. Like, I can't even really explain it.
So I finally saw Jarhead, and I'm tired of people telling me to see Jarhead. I don't remember, I can't name you a single person that told me, but somebody somewhere told me to see Jarhead at some point, and I finally saw it for the first time. Okay. Jake Gyllenhaal is a great actor. Start off with that. Jamie Foxx is really funny, and he's a pretty solid actor. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not a fan of taking one guy's opinion and making that the basis of an entire film, unless it's done so in a non-historically reflective manner. But the whole movie is framed around Desert Shield and Desert Storm in 1990 and 91. And it's framed around this conflict and how the conflict was causing a lot of these young Marines that got lost on the way to college to lose their minds. They were losing their minds and they just wanted to kill. And that was their whole thing. And the irony is that even though we did such a good job there, the U.S., the coalition forces did such a good job killing them, that the Marines did not have the opportunity that were covered in the film. And that's the whole premise. The thing is that premise is it makes sense, and I think it could have been a lot more engaging if there weren't so many events that were shoehorned in that were almost completely unbelievable. And a lot of them were from rumors from this one guy that said that they probably happened. And this is a huge trope that can happen so easily with war films that are really trying to like be quote unquote accurate, but Hollywoodify it. I wouldn't say that this is a film that Hollywoodifies the Gulf War necessarily, because I do think there's some moments that pretty accurately depict like how the actual conflict was happening. Like the conflict is the framing, like I said. The problem is that the guiding force behind the frustration is not just the conflict itself, but also these random events that happen. Like, I'll give you one example as like a minor spoiler. Unfortunately, I have to tell you
fine.
because it's
I'll
so
allow it.
crazy.
Yeah.
You not want to hear it?
I'll allow it.
No, go ahead.
I'll try to be as general as possible. But basically, there's cheating that happens, and it is filmed and shown to everybody in the unit. And it was supposed to be a movie, but it was sent as a tape, and it like ruins this one guy's like whole deployment, right? And they kind of reassert that frustration and worry of the Jody over and over and over again. And that scene is so unbelievable and almost does a disservice to the viability of anything else that Swafford is saying with Jake Gyllenhaal's character. And I think that is a major issue that doesn't leave. It keeps recurring. Like the oil fields, like sure, there were some soldiers in oil fields, but they make a big thing about the oil fields. They're like freaking soaked in it. And it's just like everything is so overly exaggerated when it comes to those events that it really just kind of discredits the whole story's viability. And the story is narrated by Swafford. So it's like that is the story. The plot is from Swafford's perspective. But it's just very hard to concentrate when that is kind of like looming the whole time, that there's these random events that are like so unbelievable happening. And it's not just Hollywoodified or anything. It's like actually just things that just probably didn't happen, even though it's framed historically, you know. So it's very, it butts heads multiple times for me. But the effects are great. Like I said, Gyllenhaal does a really great job. Even though the boot camp scene is very, particularly with the drill sergeant, is clearly ripped from Full Metal Jacket. I mean,
Sure.
Clearly, it's like there's no negotiating it. It's very well acted and very convincing. And the general pacing of them going into the war, you feel the fatigue of them going out there and being deployed in the middle of a desert, doing all this random stupid training just to kill time, only to not be a part of it. Is like, that's a great concept. And there's parts of it that are executed fairly well, but it's just so distracting. Like the unreliable narrator angle is very distracting, and that's like my major criticism with it.
Who directed that? It's not Catherine Bigelow, is it? She made The Hurt Locker.
Sam Mendes.
Oh, okay. I don't know much about him. I know he directed those 2 James Bond movies, and that's kind of all I know about Sam Mendes.
I know he came from a theater background, interestingly enough, but which is always kind of funny to me because he's worked with Roger Deakins a lot since, and I feel like a lot of his movies are about visual flair, which you don't necessarily expect from someone coming from the stage directing.
Well, I am not going to talk about a war film at all. Because I yesterday rewatched, for the first time in a long time, first time since before I had a Letterboxd account, the movie Big Fish, directed by Tim Burton. And maybe I'm only looking on this with rose-tinted glasses now because it's the first time I've seen it in a long time. But I think this might be Tim Burton's best movie. Wow. It doesn't get a lot of praise in that department. A lot of people speak of it as Tim Burton's least Tim Burton-y movie. But I don't think that's true. I think this is, if we're looking at it more accurately, I think that it's more Tim Burton's movie where he gets out of his own way the most, because it's not an especially Tim Burton plot, but his aesthetics and his style are all over it. That kind of small town whimsy is throughout this movie. And it's, you know, made with his usual collaborators, Danny Elfman, Helena Bonham Carter's in it, but it doesn't have that Tim Burton feel. The score isn't constantly going la 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 la. You know, it's not all set at night for no reason. It's actually a very sweet story. That, I mean, maybe that's another reason that it really hits me, is I saw the musical during a very particular time in high school, so I do have some attachment to the story. But the general concept is it's about a man named Edward Bloom, who, when he's an older man, is played by Albert Finney. And Edward Bloom is dying, and his son, played by Billy Crudup, they have a strained relationship, but he comes home to help look after him. And essentially, Edward has spent his whole life as a storyteller. He's told his son nothing but these really elaborate kind of big fish stories about his own life. So Billy Crudup is kind of struggling with this fact of, look, you're about to die, and I feel like I don't know my own father, and I want to tell my son who his grandson was. But Edward's perspective is, well, my stories are who I am, and if you can't appreciate that, then you can't appreciate who I am. Now, that sounds very dark and dramatic, and the stuff that's set during the present day is, but a lot of the movie is Edward's flashbacks to the stories that he tells. So essentially his own past, but warped by the way he's told them as bedtime stories to his son his whole life. In that version of his past, Ewan McGregor plays the young Edward Bloom, and he has a really fun kind of aw shucks sort of nostalgia about the way that he plays the character. All those flashbacks are really, really charming, and it is dramatic throughout, and then the climax hits, and it's incredibly sweet and very, very sad and absolutely gutting in a way I think no other movie I've seen is. I'm not going to say no other movie is sad or as effective as Big Fish, but Big Fish has a very particular emotional effect that I don't think I've ever seen another movie hit on quite so precisely. I'm speaking vaguely, of course, so as not to spoil it, because I do think it's really worth watching. But if you're somebody who, I think if you like a movie like Forrest Gump, if you like Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and if you don't mind Tim Burton, but maybe wish that all his movies didn't feel like Sleepy Hollow, this could be a really great fit for what you appreciate in films. I think it's really great, and it makes me cry. And actually, when I watched it the other day, I watched it with Gloria, and my roommate came downstairs like 10 minutes in, and he was like, "Oh, what are you watching?" And we were like, "Oh, you can sit and watch it with us if you want." And he hung out for the rest of the film. And by the end, he and I were both, sniffling and wiping our eyes. And Gloria was the only one who didn't cry. So wow. That's my recommendation for Big Fish. 4 out of 5.
That's been on my watch list for a really long time. I have something like 1,900 films, and that's among the first 100 that have been on that list the longest. So wow. I'll get to it. I've been wanting to.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
I think I added it because Christian added it or something.
Cool.
Well, is it time for the next prompt poll?
Yes.
Yep. Coding. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Oh, okay, here we go. What is it going to be? I was hoping it'd be more immediate than this.
Oh, no.
Oh my God, this one's great. It's so great. A film that is currently showing in theaters.
Let's go!
I read it and I knew it had to be Christian. He was like, I don't know what prompt to put. Showing in theaters.
Now let's think logistically here, because I might cut some of this out. Obviously, as is the rule of the show, you've got 24 hours, but we aren't recording for another 2 weeks. So are we saying something that's playing now in cinemas, or something that will be playing within the 2 weeks between now and our next
As
recording?
Prompt writer, I can provide statutory interpretation. I think at any point in a week, as long as it's something all three of us are able to see, it doesn't need to be out right now. It just needs to be out before we record.
All right, 24 hours, Mitchell.
Ooh.
Misa scared.
The game of the game of the game of the game of the game.